All right, thanks everybody. I'll just start by introducing myself. I'm Greg Finch. I'm the coach and lead motivation officer at Surf Strong Fit. And we're live here in the Surfers Over 70 group. And I want to really thank Bill Rosenblatt for having me on. And we're live and we really love to hear from you guys. So if you want to put comments in here, we're going to get to as many questions as we can. And we're just going to cover as many topics as we have time for. But I'd really like to start with letting Bill talk a little bit about this journey that's been pretty amazing this last year. This group has grown to over 29,000 people in a little over a year. And it's just a great story of how the community of surfing can kind of come together. So, Bill, thanks for having me. And let's just talk a little bit about you and the group.
Thanks, Greg. Really appreciate it. Yeah, the group kind of started as a goof. I surf I live in the summer from May to October. I live in New Jersey, and in wintertime I live in Puerto Rico. And I'm 75. I've been retired probably about 4 or 5 years. And we were goofing in the water one day, and someone asked me how old I was. And I told them, and they were like, "Oh man, you're one of the oldest people I know." And then I started asking around of other people, going, "Hey, who else is anybody else this old?" And little by little, there were a few people that showed up. And surprisingly enough, I thought, well, let me just start a group like this just to see who's if there are people, and if there are, what are they doing to stay in the water? What are they doing to stay fit? What are they kind of issues do they have? What kind of memories they have? And the site to me has just been spectacular because it's really served all those purposes. People put on great memory things, people put on great old stories, great old pictures, and people also ask questions about, hey, I'm getting a knee surgery, or I'm getting this, or I'm getting that. How do I come back? Or just in general, some people are asking, how do I how do I deal with my pop up getting slow, or my shoulder, or all those things that we all have. And I think it's been a really good forum. And one of our members, Terry, asked Terry Enslam, suggested that she had worked with Greg. So it was like, oh man, cool. Let me get a hold of Greg and see if we can do this, and that might help people. So hopefully, if you have questions about your issues or anything else, please feel free to ask. Put them in the comments. I'm looking at the comments. How old is your picture on Facebook? Are you talking about me? The picture walking up the hill is relatively new. It's probably last fall. If it's the one with me carrying the surfboard on my shoulder, pretty much all the other ones are within the last year, because I'm really lucky. In Puerto Rico, I have a bunch of friends who are photographers, and they'll always get pictures of me. And I was 75 in January. So the answer to that question.
Yeah, congrats. Yeah, that's
Um,
great. It's amazing, and that's really the goal, right? It's just staying connected to the ocean, doing the work to be able to surf till the end, and
exactly.
that's really what this is all about. The time that we're going to take today, and just like answering questions for sure, and just kind of conveying some of the things that I see recurring so often, and how to go about progressing and making small steps forward to stay surfing.
Yep, yep. And the other one of the things that really stimulated my interest as well is about 3 years ago. Yeah, about 3 years ago, I started really having shoulder problems.
Mhm.
Uh, I was having trouble lifting up my arm. Paddling got really difficult. Popping up got really hard. Uh, I'm lucky. I have a friend who's a sports medicine physician, and she took an MRI, and luckily I'd been doing a lot of yoga and a lot of work on my own. uh, she got me into physical therapy for about 4 months, 5 months, and it's really been great. I appreciate some of the people already asking questions, and it's great.
Yeah,
So
I'm
I
starting
hope
those
we address.
comments, and we'll be able to get to some of those because those are definitely some of the comments already coming in are certainly recurring.
Yeah, that's great. I really appreciate that people are here and doing it. And I wish for all of you. I just went to see I came back from Puerto Rico a month ago, and I went to see the doctor for a follow up. And we joke because she surfs as well, and she kept looking at me, going, if I put your MRI and your X-rays over here, and a video of you surfing over here, it looks like two different people. So, you guys can do it. You folks can really, really work at it. So, Greg, you wanna begin your thing, and if we see certain questions specifically that we aren't going to answer, then please make sure you ask.
Yeah, definitely. So, what I'd like to start with is, yeah, keep those comments coming in. This video, if you're live, great. It will live on the page after we're done too, so you can come back to it, and I can come back to it. So you can keep commenting on it, and I can answer questions if we don't get to all of them live. I can give some support and give some resources out to the group to be able to help some of the comments as they come in later. Um, there is a few foundational things I always like to start with anybody that I work with, or any surfer that I'm trying to help. The main thing is to realize that abundance of information is so common in almost any solution that we're trying to solve. And surfing is no different. We have access to so much information, and it's a wonderful resource. But a lot of times, what can happen is that becomes information overload, and that a lot of time leads us to not taking any action. Too many answers just stops us in our tracks. So, one thing I'd say across the board to everybody is, regardless of what you're struggling with or what you're trying to improve, is always think about it in small, incremental progressions. And the best way to do that is to begin again every day. So start with neutral every day. What that does is it does two main things. The first one is you're always able to learn from the past, whether that was injury specific or a negative experience that you have. You learn from that and then you let it go. And you are always in the moment to find out what is the highest priority that I can do right now to have my step go forward and to progress in that way. Same thing happens when you make progressions and you really are improving something. You learn from that, store it, and then also let that go. Because what will happen is progression is not linear. It doesn't go up just like steps. It tends to fluctuate, drop, progress, drop. And what happens a lot, and what I see recur often, is we make these strides and then we drop just a little bit, and our minds process that as I'm less than I was, even though we've made this huge progress prior to that. A lot of times we don't acknowledge it or don't notice it, and you really have to celebrate the wins. That's what allows you to keep moving forward and to keep that progression happening. So as we go into some of the specific questions, just if you take one thing away from this today and moving forward, is begin again every day and prioritize what's going to give you the biggest return on your investment of time, energy, and attention. So I'm going to go through some of the comments here that we're already getting. So thanks for doing that. Keep them coming. So here is definitely the top three things that I get asked as a coach specific to surfing and how to improve is how to make a pop-up better. So it's so central, of course, to our surfing experience, and so critical at that point of catching that wave. And the number one thing I can tell everybody on how to make a pop-up better is to practice strength-based movement most days out of the water, primarily being push-ups. those primal movements and those really base foundational strength are crucial to maintaining your strength, your speed, and your ability to have endurance through a session, through multiple sessions throughout a week. Start very, very focused on how much you're doing in a day, not to overuse. I literally start clients a lot of times, regardless of where they are on the spectrum of total strength. I'll say do 5 push-ups every morning for a week. And that doesn't sound like many, and it isn't, but it's really about setting a habit, and then you build from there to where clients are doing 25, 30 push-ups in a set, taking a break, recovering, maybe doing another set. But if you start at this high number, you will not be able to maintain that. Your brain will find excuses and distractions to keep you from being consistent in that. So start very focused, very incremental, and do it consistently every day. That's the number one thing. The progression from that at some point in your day, I also advocate doing dry land pop-ups. Practice what you're going to utilize in your surfing more consistently. There's that word again. You'll hear me saying it all the time. Everything is about consistency. Practicing your dry land pop-up, and if whenever possible, video that. Just put your phone up, prop it up somewhere, take a video of it, and watch it. There's something very, very powerful about having that third person perspective of what you're doing, what you feel you're doing, and what your body is actually doing will not line up often. And that perspective will really help hone you in on some of the areas that you need to practice. Doing the pop-up consistently really just helps you start to get the components that you need to have within your pop-up in the water. It's fixed, it's stable, the wave and all these other circles of surfing aren't moving, and you're able to really just focus on that repetition of doing that. The third piece of that for a pop-up is hip mobility. Everybody has some level of ability to improve their range of motion in their hips. And it's really critical to be able to speed your pop-up if you're struggling with that, to get your hips and your feet underneath you, hip mobility, specific in hip flexors, other range of motion in hamstrings. So what I'm going to do right now, because this is such a specific question that I get, so I'm also going to show hip mobility, question mark, question mark, question mark. So these really line up together. So what I'm going to show you is I'm going to share this flow that I do with all clients. Do this flow with me. As I show it and stream through this here, I want you to think about, if you have space, go ahead and try it wherever you are watching this. But what I'd really like you to do is focus on your breath, which we're going to talk about in a second because we're getting some other questions as well. I want you to think about your breath as you watch this flow. So what we call nasal inhalation, diaphragmatic, down deep in your diaphragm at the bottom of what you perceive as your lungs. That muscle of that diaphragm is really the much more effective way for you to be breathing. If you're breathing through your mouth, it tends to be top lung feel, nasal inhalation, diaphragmatic fills that balloon from the bottom up. I want you thinking in 5-second increments as you watch this flow. And essentially, anybody that has done some yoga will recognize these very familiar postures of down dog, up dog or cobra, and child's pose. The model will be doing them in 5-second flows. And that's what you want to think about your breath mimicking as we watch through this. So we'll kind of go through this here and just show you a little bit.
You know, one of the things, I'm going to interrupt for a second.
Sure, no interruption.
One of the things that I've discovered as I've been working through all this stuff has been, and I'm a baseball fan as well. So I was watching the other day and they were talking about changing someone's swing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for most of us, we learned to pop up the way we learned to pop up, the way we learned to surf. It's that we went out and we did it. There were no teachers for us. There was no coaches. There were no instructors. And what I found was that by practicing and then making some adaptations,
Mhm.
it's improved my pop-up.
Mhm. Yeah.
When I do dryland pop-ups, I'm much more conscious now of bringing my back foot up
Mhm.
and almost like pop through, not pop up.
Yeah.
If
Yeah,
that
that's
makes
great.
sense.
Yeah.
That's just like something else someone has taught me.
Yeah. And also too that ability to give the attention specifically to the pop-up on dry land. That's such a luxury. When we're surfing, obviously the waves moving, wind, other boards, other surfers, our own board, all of these circles are moving. And it's going to be muscle memory and it's going to be in that place where you can give only as much attention as you can give to it. But when you're on dry land, all those distractions go away and you can focus on repeat repetition in something and really hone that muscle memory to improve to where that just brings a huge asset back to your surfing. So yeah, and that's a great visual too, that pop through, that idea you're bringing those hips, feet, knees, your whole lower extremities, you're popping through that because your board is moving as you're going through, so you're really popping to that distance in front. That's a great visual. So as we watch kind of through here, this flow is essentially 5.5 seconds of an inhale, 5 to 6 seconds, 5 to 6 seconds as an exhale. It can be mouth or nose. Over a course of a minute, you're getting about 5.5 liters of oxygen exchange within that, give or take. That ability, I use this as a great recovery tool as well. So we'll talk about breath in a second, but just practice your breath as the model kind of goes through this flow here. So again, familiar flows through, and it's kind of going through this idea of as you get to that child's pose, 5 second. Inhale, down dog. Exhale, up dog or cobra. And you can do this. I have clients and myself do this every day as part of a morning routine that they have. It keys onto your breath. It gets you flowing through. Certainly, any kind of modifications necessary for this is perfectly fine. Down dog, some clients will do down dogs from their knee. Some clients will not go to the full extreme of the cobra because it's too much on their lumbar spine or lower back. But just keen on that idea of your breath as you move through this flow, you're getting alignment, you're getting breath, you're getting mobility, and it gives you the attention to all of those things in a nice, even flow. On top of that, it's everywhere that you are. You travel, you can do it. You're at a friend's house staying over, you can do it. There's nothing but the attention and concentration to stay consistent with it is all you need. Good.
Talking about breath,
Yeah.
if you've got time and are interested in reading,
Mm-hmm.
there's two things that I recently got turned on to. One is the book Breath, Breath, by James Nestor, which
Mm-hmm.
is really amazing book, which talks about different kinds of breathing, the
Mm-hmm.
benefits as well as the disadvantages and things that poor breathing can result in. For me, I really resonated with that. I was a licensed psychologist and practiced mind body work for decades. And the way I found Nestor is, if you're interested, Dave Rostovich has a podcast called Water People.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I first heard about Nestor and listened to that podcast. So give that one you might want to listen to that before you buy the book or before you get the book. But it was really, amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And a simple anecdotal piece of information. Yesterday, I had my annual physical, and as I was waiting for the doctor to come in to do my blood pressure, I was doing the 5 second breathing. Inhale for 5, exhale for 5, diaphragmatic breathing. They came in to look at my blood pressure, and he goes, "Is that your blood pressure usually 108/70?" And I said, it's usually pretty low because I know how to breathe.
Yeah, it does. It makes a huge difference. And that book is amazing. And it's really where I was first introduced to it. Whether he coined it or it's the first time I was exposed to it, that idea of perfect breath. And I really have adapted that idea from his book, which is wonderful. What I do love about that book, in addition to all the informations there, is that he's not writing from the point of an expert. He has a journalist background, and so he's writing from the point of his own journey, but told with a journalist's eye. So the information is really easily absorbed into something that you can implement. And for me, that's where the power comes in on any kind of information. How do we take it, internalize it, and implement it? And so that ability of using that perfect breath, the scenarios of this flow that I just showed you, and also using that the next time you surf. So when you're paddling out, you're duck diving, nasal passages aren't necessarily clear. This is not necessarily the time for you to focus on nasal diaphragmatic breathing because it might not physically be able to be there. But when you get back out and you sit up on your board, you're waiting for that set, clear your nasal passages, good posture, decompress your spine, and go right into perfect breath. If you do that, two things will happen. Two main things will happen. A lot of physiological things are happening, but two main things that you can really benefit from is one, you are recovering. Just like Bill mentioned about blood pressure dropping, breathing from that is such a positive effect on all of those things and bringing the system down, which allows you to be more efficient, which allows you to retain more energy. Thus, your endurance is pushed out. You start surfing, you have a gas tank. Your gas tank is not going to change from that point of getting into the water. Your job is to be the most efficient and effective with that gas tank to allow it to be efficient over that time in your session. Breathing is such a key part of that for your recovery. Bring your heart rate back down, recover back down to baseline as best you can. The second and one of the most powerful parts of that is when you turn on that and paddle for that wave, you're going to be in the best place that you can to get that wave because your energy is going to be there, your endurance is going to be there. Ideal. Drop in, pump down the line, great wave, exhausted, kick back out, and you're paddling back out, clear your nose, and back into perfect breath. What's really powerful about it, though, is when the unexpected happens. Foot slips off, hand slips off, catch a rail, and you fall to the bottom of that wave, boom, onto your side, and that lungful of air goes poof out. Knowing that you have prepared with your breath before raises your confidence significantly. That practice of knowing that when you're underwater and that instant of unexpected happens, your first impulse and reflex is going to be to struggle to the surface. If you have prepared your breath and your confidence knowing that you're there and all the practice leading up to that, you know your fitness foundation and your surfing is strong, you will be in a better position to remain calm and not inefficiently use your breath. You have plenty of oxygen in your body. That lungful of air is not going to make or break the position that you're in right there. And having the confidence to know that is really, really crucial because it shy away from even danger, putting yourself in a dangerous position. Shy of that, if you're efficient and you get up and you go right back into your breathing, that gas tank that you have is going to be more full than if you struggle, get to the top. You're going to be gasping for air and you're going to have used a lot more of that endurance that you have available. And you might have to end your session soon and you might have to change what you're doing. But if you're calm and focused, you're going to be in a better position. And that's about preparation. Great question.
Casey's question about how do you strengthen your breath long term, twofold. Number one, that is addressed. There's a part in the back of the book of Nestor's book, which he talks about different breathing techniques that have been used by Navy SEALs, that have been used by all sorts of people to build up the strength of your breath. And the other thing is to really just practice. It's like anything else, practice. The idea of breathing in for a fixed count diaphragmatically, then trying to hold it. One of the techniques she talks about is breathe in for 5, hold it for 5, exhale for 5, hold it for 5, breathe in. And it's like anything else. The more you train it,
Mm-hmm.
the better the more strength you can develop in your breath long term. A lot of the guys, Joe Sheridan, who's a friend of mine, who one of the teachers of that Waterman's Survival course,
Mm-hmm.
where they work with big wave riders. That's one of the things they talk about is strengthening your breath and being able to hold your breath. And they do that by teaching breathing techniques.
Yeah. That's great. Great question, Casey. So let's go back and some of the earlier questions that we kind of jumped over. That was a breathing one. Pop up, good. So here's a great question too. Is every year I have a 7-month break out of the water and it gets really tough starting back. I found push-ups are pretty helpful for my pop-up. Doing door hangs is good too. So what are the great things about this idea? Less of a question and more just a good observation is, and what I see so often is, as surfers, it's such a core part of our movement and our fitness. And doing it, it's a high level activity. To do it even mediocre, it takes a lot of practice, takes a lot of energy, takes a lot of endurance to do it. As we hopefully are all more than mediocre, it takes even more of those things to be able to do it well. So one thing that I see so often is, because it's such a high level activity, when we're at either a certain age, have more time, are surfing more in our weeks and our months, it does benefit us in that baseline of our fitness. What happens, of course, so often in life is we get in different points of our life, different circumstances, and we don't have the time or ability to surf as much. So maybe that surfing is down to half or down to a third. A lot of times we know, quote unquote, we're surfing less, but we don't necessarily know what that actually means in total output. And what starts happening is exactly this: longer stretches between sessions. Thus, we're not maintaining that surf fitness foundation that we really need. So when we get back into the water, we might notice that our endurance is struggling. We might notice that we're tighter. We might notice that our breath is not there as much. Thus, our surfing suffers. And then that negatively compounds our feelings around it. So the opportunity for all of us is, this dry land practice does such a huge benefit to your overall life, certainly, and also the ability to, when necessary, between longer stretches of surfing, you get back to surfing and feel really great about it, because you're like, okay, maybe I need to get that few iterations in to get back to the timing for my actual pop-up and my technique on a wave, but my endurance and my strength is there. And that's a huge confidence boost. And it's also so profound into, okay, I can't surf right now. And that stinks, but I know when it's ready and I have the opportunity, I'm going to be able to do it at a high level. And that's really what the focus is on most of the coaching that I do. Again, here's that word consistency: small incremental improvements every day. And so when you surf, you see that benefit, and then that positively reinforces everything that you're doing. It's very much about knowing what you need to do and staying accountable to the small things between your surfing. And then you get to work on the higher level things within a session and not feel like you're struggling physically as much as you would if you're doing nothing. So great observation there. Perfect. So let's scroll through here. I have a couple more things that I want to show. We'll move through here as we see the questions, but I want to show this real quick. Morning routine is one of the most profound ways that you can impact your day positively, certainly your surfing. And it's also an easy barrier of entry for setting new habits. So this is a common thing that I get. I'll be somewhere, somebody finds out what I do, and they'll, corner me and be like, tell me what to do. to help with my surfing, and my surfing's starting to struggle. And I'm not being flippant. This is very genuine when I say to them, do anything for the next 3 weeks every day, and then come back to me and I will give you more homework to do. And the reason that that answer is always the same is it goes back to that idea of information overload. It really, what you do is important, but it becomes secondary if you're not able to be doing the basics consistently throughout your day. So a morning routine is a really great entry into that to stay consistent. Again, we're not talking an hour here. We're talking starting with 5 minutes, like that 5 push-ups to start with. Start with 5 minutes. This is, if a client has time for one thing in their day, it's always this that I give them the start of the day with. It's just called static back. And essentially what it is exactly like it looks right there. You're laying flat on a surface, 90-90 with your arms, which also gives you a little bit more of a realignment component. And hips are elevated, or knees and feet are elevated in 90 degrees. Hips are 90 degrees, knees are 90 degrees. Find a level surface that gives you that, whether it's a chair, a couch, whatever. You want to take the weight of your lower body off of your torso. Allow yourself to relax into that. Our lives are very much about internal rotation, compression on our spine, especially lumbar spine or lower back. All of our sitting, all of our computer work, driving in a car, your back rarely, if ever, is allowed to be aligned without bearing weight. So that load on your spine is almost a continuum. Even when you are sleeping, very few of us are perfectly aligned when we sleep on a fairly rigid surface. Mattresses are softer, we lay on our side. So you are still getting a lot of load within that. This allows you to relax. And one of the powerful parts about it is definitely alignment. But I'll do this with clients and I'll say, okay, breathe, 5-second breath, perfect breath, and now relax. And I'll see them try to relax, and okay, I'm relaxed. I'm like, okay, take another breath, and on your exhale, really focus on letting tension go and relax. And often they'll feel either a decompression of their spine, they'll feel like, oh, I was holding up in my neck and tension. It's just a place that you are supported in your back, neck, and arms and hips, and it allows you to really let go. This is a reset and a realignment that is very powerful to do first thing in the morning. Get up out of bed, move around a little bit, but before your routine starts, this is the first thing that you do. Set yourself in that place, give yourself 3 to 5 minutes. Just stay in this posture and focus on breathing. It will focus your attention. It will give you that 3 to 5 minutes of focused breath, and it will realign you for the start of your day. At the end of your day, replicate that for a cool down into your sleep, focusing on breath relaxing, focusing on your mind, focusing on letting go of the day, good, bad, or ugly, and you will get yourself in a position to physically decompress, mentally decompress, and hopefully put yourself in the best position for your sleep. This is the transition into the most important part of your day that is not active in your day. Everybody needs more sleep that is as regenerating and refreshing as possible. So I used to struggle with sleep a lot, and I'm much better now, but I can always improve. And so I really focus on with clients is yes, it will take some changing of habits, but taking screens off of your eyes and your mind 60 minutes before you sleep has a very big positive effect on your sleep. And it's not easy if you do that, and that's part of your routine to change that. But good sleep doesn't just happen. it's cultivated. So small incremental steps to do that. And that's a huge part of resetting and starting and that idea of positive progression. So
Greg, there's a couple questions I see about hips.
sure.
You
Oh,
want to,
yeah.
can you briefly discuss that or
Sure.
touch on
Yeah,
some of that?
absolutely. So let's take this off here. And all of these videos up here and some of the resources that I've discussed on here too, we'll have a way to allow you to get those too. So don't feel like you have to. This video will live in the group too, so you can go back and watch it. And I'm a resource for you to reach out to. So let's see. All right, yeah, here. I was just talking about rotation. Yep. So discuss the rotation of the hips while popping up. Yep, this is hard. So it goes back to the idea of that ability to start with realignment. So I'll revert back to almost the static back idea. When you start, so a mentor of mine, Dr. Tim Brown, who's like the co-medical director of the World Surf League, has done amazing work across the board, but specifically within the surf community. A lot of his concepts and a lot of his taping concepts, you've probably seen them. Carrie Walsh, when she won her gold, that tape that she was wearing on her, I think it was her shoulder or her knee, that came from techniques that Dr. Tim Brown developed over the years. He was the original director of the Association of Volleyball Professionals, Beach, and developed that over years and decades. He has a concept that I've really taken to heart, and it's a great, I use it as a key, if you will, on checking in on what you need to give the most attention to. So the way the key works is it really, I just call it, for myself, I just call it the Surf Strong circle of fit. So think of it as a continuum in a circle. It starts with alignment. Alignment is always the first place that you look to make sure. There's no such thing as perfect alignment. We're just striving for alignment to give ourselves that best place in which to then work and improve on. If we're out of alignment, anything we add to that can really exacerbate that misalignment, thus overuse, instability that all comes from misalignment. So check in, use static back as a way to align and try to visualize and prioritize your alignment. Alignment, some of these things we already talked about, alignment moves into breath. Breath is the driver of everything we do metabolically, recovery. Your respiration is that key place in which to drive all of these actions that we're trying to take and to improve on. Breath is one of those unique places that is both voluntary and involuntary. Obviously, back to the sleep. When you're asleep, you're not thinking about it, you're breathing. In your conscious day, you can have a positive, voluntary impact on your breathing. It takes your attention and your focus to do that. That's a huge opportunity for you. Breath moves into mobility, healthy range of motion through your body, your joints, and those muscle systems that are getting you through what you want to operate. Strong, healthy mobility and range of motion. Mobility moves into stability. So taking those three prior and sitting it on a stable surface. It's critical for everyone. As surfers, it is really important to be able to stabilize on something that is constantly in motion. Your body, your board, the wave, the wind, all of those things are in perpetual motion. So to be able to stabilize from wherever you are, put yourself in a really, really important position to then use, which is the last piece. It moves into strength. Strength is not the least important, but it's only as effective as it's sitting on the foundation of everything before. If you're misaligned and you add additional strength, that strength is going to push you into farther into misalignment. So as you work on improving strength, then strength moves right back into alignment. So that circle allows you to key into where you are at any point and prioritize what's going to give me the biggest return right now. Okay, all of these things, like, okay, I'm really out of alignment. I need to spend my time and attention on my alignment right now. And then I can focus on doing some of the other things specific to hips and that rotation of that. It goes back to very similar to the pop up idea of those two things that you need to focus on. You need to focus on practicing your pop up in dry land and making sure that your hip mobility supports your action to get through that rotation. So, some modifications that I'll do with clients is essentially being on their pop-up form, the bottom of the push-up, if you will, pushing to the top of the push-up, which was essentially the action moving into your pop-up, and practice pulling single leg underneath, almost like a mountain climber form of that. It's basically the top, it's like a plank, and then you're driving that knee underneath you back to start, alternate to the other side, pulling that leg underneath you. You're in action, using the strength within your hips. You're also getting the benefit of stabilizing through your upper body, down through your center and your core. You're using then that endurance to practice getting those hips underneath you. Going back to then the pop-up form where you're practicing that rotation of your hips as you actually do it. Again, small increments every day, 5, and build on that as you move through. Video whenever possible to get that perspective. If you do ever work with a coach, I have clients video their form regularly for them to watch it and then for us to discuss when we get together. And that is when you see it, a lot of times you're like, okay, that's right there. That left hip is dragging. I need to practice. I need to get more mobility in that hip, and I need to practice moving that around. And that will then thus improve specifically in the surfing when you're in the water. Great question.
As somebody also mentioned a little earlier, there are a lot of yoga positions that are especially helpful for hip mobility. If you're in a like a warrior position, which is kind of like a lunge, if you're in that and you can go from side to side, that can be really helpful. And there's another one where it's like a seated spinal twist. Where you have one leg over the other, and it's moving the hip around, and you work on the other one as well. I think that there's some people who have had hip surgeries who've learned an awful lot about different hip stretches and hip mobility.
They're unfortunate experts, right? So I'm going to move here. So I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you a really easy thing. This is also, again, to be able to implement it. We sit a lot, too much, by the way. Get up, set timers. If you're sitting in a chair longer than 20 minutes, set a timer and get yourself up and move. A lot of times that ability of we're made to move. As humans, our bodies are made to move. They're not made to be static and in a single place. That's where a lot of the tension and tightness can come from. Small little movements, getting up. Like I have a timer whenever I'm working. Okay, bing, and it gets up. I just go up, walk around the house. If I have a little bit more time, I walk around the block, come back. That is really powerful for you. When you are sitting, one thing that you're working on for hip mobility is your hip flexor, which basically when you're seated, a lot of you are probably sitting right now. If you put your thumbs basically right in the crook of where you're sitting and you push, you're going to feel your hip flexor muscle there. It tightens down when you're in a seated position because most of us are not flexing our glutes or butt muscles when we're sitting. Those muscles relax, and to keep you in that seated position, even if your back's against something, that hip flexor is going to go whoop and it's going to contract. That brings on a lot of tightness in our hips. So you want to move through getting more range of motion in your hip flexors, making sure they're not tight. One of the great ways to do that is when you're seated, sitting and just basically crossing your leg over and being tall through that. You don't even have to really put any pressure on it. You certainly don't want to put a lot of pressure on it, but just that ability to kind of open it up a little bit more as you breathe and relax. That key, again, breathing and allowing your body to release tension. When your brain senses tightness or tension or energy, it's going to look for an opposing muscle to contract to help protect. That's its primary job, is to protect you. So when you have tightness, it's looking for a counter muscle, a complementary muscle to help protect and tighten. Your job is, in a controlled setting, is to always try to relax and notice where you're carrying that tension. It's going to help you improve your alignment when you're allowed to release through something. Okay, that was a great question. Let's move through. So we have a question. We have a couple questions about shoulders. We haven't talked about shoulder at all. Save the best for last, if you will. Shoulder issues is really what started me on this path as a coach. So I'm 48 now. When I was about 25, I was playing collegiate volleyball, practicing twice a day. I was continuing to surf twice a day. And I woke up one morning and couldn't lift my I'm left-handed, couldn't lift my left arm above my chest line. And it scared the crap out of me. Thankfully, I was really lucky. I got into a doctor very quick. They did an MRI. They said, no damage. You might have a little bit of a tear in the labrum, but you're just in chronic overuse. You need to back off. You need to start some mobility and some light strengthening, and everything will be fine. So I knew that right away. But one of the keys for that for me, and what really started me down this path, is that showed me an idea of what it would be like if I wasn't able to get back in the ocean and surf. And surfing for me is just, I'm a better version of myself when I get in the water. And I knew already at 25, I want that in my life for the rest of my life. So I knew things had to change. And this journey has really been a big part of that start at that place is, what do I need to do and what do I need to build to stay consistent with to make sure that I keep surfing in my life for the rest of my life? So shoulder specific, let's say it's shy of an acute injury, because that takes other diagnosis and understanding. If you do have a tear in your labrum, if you have a rotator cuff injury, if you have a joint specific injury, this is something out of the scope of the work that we can do. So let's say we're just shy of that. We're maybe in some chronic overuse, some chronic tightness. Again, here's that word, consistency. You need to start small, incremental, non-weight bearing range of motion work that uses isometric contraction. And really, that's just a fancy word of saying muscles that are complementary to each other. You have the ability to contract to make it. I always use the example of you're moving through quicksand. If you're moving through quicksand, every muscle is firing to go through something. So that's contraction without tension. Try to delineate between those two. So in a shoulder specific, if you have an exercise band that's resisted this way, if you don't, you can lay on your side. If I'm laying on my side right here on my left, and I have a small, like a soup can, very lightweight, and you're doing external rotation through that, keep yourself aligned at all possible. It will start to isolate in a positive way through your shoulder and rotator cuff. The physicality and anatomy of your shoulder, your connective tissue, ligaments, tendons, blood flow goes through what is a relatively very small area of your shoulder. When you get any inflammation, overuse, and that shoulder girdle contracts down on that, it starts restricting blood flow at differing levels. This is what happened to me on a very exaggerated level when I couldn't lift my arm. Essentially, blood was not able to get through to get back to recovery. So really overly simplified, but you're metabolizing energy. That oxygenated blood is carrying energy out to your extremities for you to use. That energy is used. Deoxygenated blood is coming back through your heart, getting oxygenated with your lungs, and moving back through in this very oversimplified metabolic state. When that restriction goes down, that's not able to recover at that same level. So, what you want to do is make sure that you're getting through those smaller connective parts of your shoulder to get healthy range of motion working without activating the larger muscles in your shoulder. They will take over when you add strength. So if you were trying to do, say, this on your side external rotation, and you were trying to do it with 10, 15 pounds, even if your strength could handle it, it's not getting into those smaller components of your shoulder. We paddle. So our latissimus dorsi and our deltoid and all these large muscles in our upper body are more developed than the general public because it's what we do. We paddle. And so you want to get into these smaller complementary areas of your shoulder to give it healthy recovery, healthy range of motion. And that goes back to that key: alignment, breath, mobility, stability, strength. You always want to try to move through those areas. Again, consistent every day. I have a routine, and I can share it with anybody that would like it. Basically, about 5 parts to it. I have a 2-parter, and I'll do 5 one day, 5 the next day. And a lot of it is exactly what I'm describing: external rotation, then have it on the outside, internal rotation, non-weight bearing range of motion, where I'm coming through healthy movement through here to try to keep it going through that range of motion. In your chest, again, paddling strength, everything that we're doing, we get developed through our shoulder line and strengthen our chest. This shortening of this pectoral major and minor muscle then keeps exaggerating down to get more internal rotation on your shoulder. Again, posture in our normal days bringing us here. Shortening of this pectoral major and minor muscle also I'm really exaggerating, but we can get to this state where now everything's coming up into neckline and we're deactivating through our chest. So that 90-90 in the static back that we talked about earlier is very much about shoulder range of motion. It's very much about elongating through your chest line to counterbalance back to alignment as best you can, to get yourself in that state where most of our activity, being surfing, and we're surfing a lot, is pulling us into this internal rotation. You want to come back to neutral as best you can. Woo, that was a lot of talking for me. Bill, jump in here.
I think, well, another thing that some other resources that are very helpful, that you can either find online or occasionally, in addition to speaking with a coach or trying to get a coach. A number of years ago, I was on the advisory board of a group called Surf Stronger. They're probably DVDs back in the day. I don't know if they're still around, but a lot of these things were touched on that, as well as YouTube's a great resource. There's a lot of yoga for surfing, and if you look as well at a lot of the physical therapists who specialize in different areas, there's really great free resources for all of those things, in addition to talking to someone like Greg. And, we've been at this for, 55 minutes already.
We only touch the surface. That's just exactly the nature of it.
What I'd love to do is, I see one more question. If we can take 5 minutes and talk about that one, and then maybe get feedback from you guys via the website. And if we need to schedule another session, or if you want to get a hold of Greg individually, that would be great. So Greg, you want to briefly try to touch on lower back SI joint issues?
Yeah, that's a tough one to touch on briefly, but it's a pretty expansive thing. But what I'd say about this, and I'll more thoroughly answer this question because it does take the time and attention and deserving of it. I would basically say, without punting it, I would basically say to go back for lower back specific. Lower back issues are complicated in certain ways if we have underpinning issues for sure. A lot of what I see, again, lack of a lower than acute injury. If you have a vertebrae issue, if you have cervical spine issues, that's another level of diagnosis that you really need to understand where you are if some of those issues are exacerbating or the source of your low back pain. What I see when clients come to me and get coaching, a lot of times what that is it circles back to that idea of misalignment. So posturally, they're in a place where they're putting so much load on their low back. And a lot of that has to come to do with what your hips are doing and what your shoulders and cervical spine or up into your neck is doing to overload onto your low back or lumbar spine. So what I find the most success with, again, shy of acute injury, is making sure that you're prioritizing a consistent alignment approach to your posture and giving yourself that ability to release tension and release tightness in areas that are loading. So a good idea, an example of that is if we're surfing and we're moving down the line and we have a restriction in our ankle line where maybe our Achilles tendon is really tight on the back of our foot and it's not allowing us to get that flexion in our ankle. And what that next point of joint comes is your knee. So if you're getting restriction, if you have restriction in that joint and your calf is, say, a little extra tight and you're moving through a bottom turn and you're going to a maneuver and you're really trying to get that top turn there and you're not getting that flexion through your ankle, that load is coming up and it's being taken by the knee. Load is going to go somewhere. And so your ability to realign, reset where you are posturally to take load off of what would be the weakest link in that posture. Lower back is where I see probably the most often. There's 3 points that I basically see the most often. T-spine through our mid back being tight, that putting load up into our shoulders. Tightness in our hips, putting extra load through lumbar spine and vice versa. T-spine being tight, loading down into our lumbar spine or low back. And then ankle tightness, calf tightness, loading up into the knee as probably the third most common that I see. So those come from a lot of different areas. It's not all just surfing specific, but because surfing is such a high level activity, you tend to see those things happening in that higher level load. So practicing, again, away from the surfing to make sure that you're working through alignment and getting through there into balancing through your alignment to take the load off lumbar spine, low back, hips, shoulders, all comes back to alignment. And I'll reference that circle, Surf Strong Circle of Fit too from Dr. Tim Brown. Circle back to that, and I'll put that resource up in the group just so we can use that as a key to prioritize where you're at. And I can answer the SI joint question when I have a little bit more time. That is a very involved area too, and I don't want to overload people with information. I'd rather just give some resources to them, and then you can follow up questions with me and be happy to help.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, no, thank you, Bill.
Great. We've been at it for damn near an hour. I appreciate everybody that's tuned in with this. I see, someone from Western Australia, which is wonderful about this community. I never could have imagined when I started this that we'd have 29,000 people from all over the world. Please keep up both all the comments, all the pictures, all the questions on the page. Greg and I will talk, and maybe we can try and do this again at another point. And if you have individual questions to address to Greg, there's Surf Strong Fit at Facebook, and please do. Again, I can't thank you guys enough for tuning in, and certainly thank you, Greg. And I hope this was of benefit to as many people as possible.
Yeah,
have a
Bill,
great weekend. Have a great
Bill, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk to the group. And yeah, I'm a resource. I'm here to help people. I really want to keep people in the water. It's just it's such an important part of who we are. You can reach out to me, facebook.com at Surf Strong Fit. I also have a group where I put a lot of my resources up, and it's just the easiest place for people to get and ask questions. I'll also do it in the Surfers Over 70 group, so you have some access to that. And then here's just my direct website too, surfstrongfit.com/programs is an easy way to reach out to me, and I'm happy to help. And thanks again, Bill. This has been really fun.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Everybody have a great weekend, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.